Welcome, and thank you for being here. This is your time to slow down, to release the weight of the day. Make yourself comfortable. Settle into bed. Rest your head on your pillow. And if you can, lower the lights until the room feels calm and quiet. Before we begin, I'd love to ask you a small favor. When you have a moment, please write in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'm always so curious to see how far these videos can reach, and it makes me feel connected to each of you. If this video helps you rest, please remember to like and subscribe. It's a small gesture, but it truly helps the video find others who might also need comfort and sleep tonight. My wish is simple, that you won't make it to the end because your body will relax, your mind will soften, and sleep will gently take over long before we finish. And if you ever have ideas for future topics, please let me know in the comments. I want this channel to be a place built for you. Take a deep breath, let it out slowly, and let's begin together. The first light of dawn had barely touched the horizon when the bells of Nalanda began to ring. Their deep, resonant sound rolled across the sprawling monastery, calling hundreds of monks and novices into wakefulness. It was the 9th century, and the monastery itself was a city of learning. Red brick walls, courtyards shaded by neem trees, grand halls filled with chanting voices, and libraries that housed texts from every corner of the known world. It was said that within the Landa's walls, one could study every discipline under the sun: logic, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy. Among the youngest novices was a boy named Arun, no more than 16, his head freshly shaved, his robe a pale saffron that marked him as new to the order. To most, Arun seemed quiet and dutiful. He rose at the sound of the bells, recited the morning chants, carried water, swept corridors, and served meals to elder monks. But inside, he carried a heart restless with questions. While others seemed content with the rhythm of renunciation, eating little, speaking little, and training their minds in discipline, Arun often found this gaze wandering. He lingered in the libraries longer than allowed, tracing the painted covers of manuscripts, wondering what secrets they held. He asked questions that made older monks frown. Why do we renounce the world if we must first know it? Or, how does one master desire if one has never felt it? His elders told him he was too curious, too young, that discipline would come him in time. But Arun could not quiet the fire in his chest. On this morning, he was called aside by one of the senior monks. His duty for the day would be to clean the quarters of the chief abbot himself. It was an honor, whispered the other novices, for the abbot was a man of immense learning and wisdom, visited by kings and foreign scholars alike. But along with the honor came a stern warning. When Arun was ushered into the abbot's private chamber, he noticed immediately how different it was from the bare cells the novices shared. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood. Scrolls and palm leaf manuscripts were stacked neatly in corners. There was a bed, simple but draped in clean linen. A clay lamp flickered on a low table, and in one corner stood a heavy wooden chest, its surface darkened with age, its edges carved with lotus patterns. The abbot, tall and stooped with ears, looked at Arun with sharp eyes, softened by kindness. Sweep the floor, wash the bowls, dust the manuscripts, he said. Then his voice dropped, low but firm. But leave that chest untouched. Arun's gaze flickered back to it. The chest with its iron lock. He bowed, murmured obedience, and set to work. Yet as he moved about the room, sweeping and dusting, he found his eyes drawn again and again to the forbidden chest. The abbot soon left, called to join a gathering of scholars debating in the lecture hall. The door closed behind him, leaving Arun alone with his task. At first, Arun worked diligently. He dusted the rows of manuscripts, careful not to smudge their fragile palm leaves. He polished the clay lamp until it gleamed. He folded the abbot's robes and placed them neatly by the bed. But with each chore completed, his curiosity grew heavier, pressing against him like the weight of the midday sun. Why forbid him the chest? What could it contain that a young novice must not see? Vedic libraries held texts from all corners of India and beyond. Medical chartisas from Pandara, astrological charts from Persia, philosophical works from China. Could this chest contain some rare treasure of knowledge? Or perhaps sacred relics, too holy for a boy like him to touch? The more he thought, the more the room itself seemed to draw him toward it. The sandalwood incense curled lazily in the air, and the faint creak of the wooden chest echoed in his ears, even though it had not moved. Arun knelt beside it. His heart raced. To break the abbot's command was unthinkable. Yet another voice whispered within him. Why would knowledge be hidden, if not to tempt the seeker? And are we not seekers here? That night, as he lay in the novices' quarters, Arun could not sleep. The chest haunted him. His mind replayed the abbot's words again and again. Leave that chest untouched. It was precisely the command that made his curiosity unbearable. He dreamed of locked doors and hidden scrolls, of voices whispering from inside the chest. By the time dawn came, Arun had made his decision. He would clean the abbot's quarters once more, and if the chance came, if the chest was unguarded, he would look. For in his young heart, one truth rang louder than the temple bells. Forbidden knowledge is the sweetest lure of all. The small cell of the abbot was not lavish by the standards of kings or nobles, but to Arun, it was a world of mysteries. Unlike the other monks' quarters, plain and bare, the abbot's chamber contained objects that carried a strange weight. A brass oil lamp that always seemed to burn longer than others. A pair of ivory-handled writing implements. And, in one shadowed corner, a wooden chest bound with iron bands. The chest fascinated him from the very first day he had been sent to clean the abbot's quarters. He swept the reed mat, dusted the shelves, emptied the clay water jars. But every time his eye strayed towards that corner, his heart beats a little faster. The abbot had been clear in his instructions. This chest, Arun, is not to be touched. Clean the room as you will, but leave that corner be. The words had been spoken gently, without menace, but that prohibition made it all the more tantalizing. At first, Arun obeyed without question. After all, a monk's duty was obedience, humility, and discipline. Yet, in his young mind, questions sprouted like weeds after the monsoon rains. What could be so precious? Relics of the Buddha, perhaps? Fragments of bone or ashes, as some monasteries kept in sacred reliquaries? Could it be gold, given by some generous patron, hidden from prying eyes? Or scrolls of wisdom too fragile, too rare for untrained hands to hold? Each time he cleaned, his imagination grew bolder. Sometimes he dreamed of opening the chest and discovering jewels. Rubies that glowed like captured fire, sapphires that shimmered like rivers at twilight. Other times he imagined that the chest held forbidden knowledge, writings of philosophers who contradicted the sutras, dangerous heresies that the occult guarded from unworthy eyes. The truth he could not guess, and that made the mystery unbearable. Over the weeks, Arun began to notice small details. The chest was locked, yes, but not always tightly. Some days the clasp seems slightly loose, the hinge not fully pressed down. Perhaps the abbot had opened it in haste and not sealed it completely. Arno's jars took longer and longer in that corner. He would wipe the floor slowly, glancing sideways to see if he could detect a gap. He told himself it was harmless curiosity, nothing more. But deep inside, he knew he was beginning to trespass, at least in thought. One evening, fate provided its chance. The monastery had gathered in the great hall for extended chanting. The abbot himself was leading the recitation, his deep voice carrying the verses across the stone walls. Arun had been excused early from the hall to fetch more oil for the lamps. As he walked past the abbot's chamber, oil jug in hand, he paused. The door was ajar. The chest sat there, as it always did, patient, silent, watchful. His breath quickened. Now or never. The chest creaked as Arun carefully eased the lid open, his pulse quickening with both fear and anticipation. Inside lay folded cloth, saffron-stained from years of touch, and bundles of palm leaf manuscripts, their edges darkened with age. He reached out, fingertips trembling, and lifted one scroll from the top of the pile. The title carved upon it made him pause. Not a sutra of the Buddha, not a commentary on the Dharma. Instead, the letters spelled Kama Sutra. For a moment, he frowned, whispering the word to himself. Karma. Desire. Shastra. Teachings. Desire was something monks were taught to deny, to conquer. Why, then, would his abbot, a man of discipline and renunciation, keep such a text hidden away in his chest? Curiosity overcame hesitation. Arun untied the cord, binding the manuscript, and unrolled the first palm leaf. The words he read startled him. Not prayers or chants, but passages about love, longing, and the meeting of man and woman. He froze. The breath caught in his throat. This was dangerous knowledge, forbidden knowledge, and yet he could not look away. The lines were not written crudely. They carried no air of vulgar jest. Instead, they spoke with a cadence of philosophy, as if describing the art of living itself. There were sentences on the duties of a householder, on friendship, on the grace of women and the conduct of men. Desire, here, was not treated as sin, but as one of life's fundamental aims, alongside duty and spiritual release. Arun's hands shook as he turned another leaf. This text, more widely remembered today as the Kama Sutra, was composed many centuries earlier, between the 3rd and 5th centuries of the Common Era. Its author, Vatsyayana, a philosopher. He lived in a time when India's cities flourished with scholars, merchants, and courtesans. For them, the pursuit of love and pleasure was not a shameful indulgence, but an art to be studied. Vatsyayana gathered wisdom from earlier writings, assembling them into one great treatise. Contrary to its reputation in the modern world as a mere book of positions, the Kama Sutra was far more expensive. It was organized into 7 books. 1. On general principles of life. 2. On the conduct of men and women. 3. On courtship and marriage. 4. On the role of the wives. 5. On courtesans. 6. On seduction and intrigue. And yet, one section, and only one, devoted to the art of physical union. The text was not meant for villagers or peasants. It was knowledge for the urban elite, for nobles, for kings, for wealthy householders who moved in circles where refinement and reputation mattered. It was also a guide for courtesans who played an important role in that society as companions, conversationalists, and muses. To Vatsyayana, pleasure was no enemy of morality. He wrote that one should seek love and intimacy in harmony with duty and with the pursuit of spiritual wisdom. The Kama Sutra, then, was not a book of excess. It was a book of balance. Back in the dim chamber, Arun's eyes widened as he realized the daring of what he held. He thought of his own training, the recitation of the Buddha's renunciations, the endless lectures about extinguishing desire, as if it were a flame. Yet here, before him, was another voice, centuries old, saying that desire, too, had its place in the human journey. The candle beside him sputtered, and for a moment he imagined that the shadows themselves leaned closer, eager to see what he would do. He swallowed hard and unrolled the next section, heart pounding louder than the rustle of palm leaves. For the first time in his monastic life, he wondered if wisdom might be hidden, not only in denying the senses, but also in understanding them. The night after Arun first unrolled the forbidden manuscript, he found it impossible to sleep. The dormitory of novices was quiet. Rows of simple mats laid out across the floor. Each boy curled in his woolen blanket. A single lamp burned low near the door, its flame shrinking into embers. But to Arun, the silence was heavy, alive with the weight of what he had seen. His heart drummed in his chest. Every time he closes his eyes, words from the palm leaf manuscript return to him. Words not of sutras, on detachment or chance of compassion, but of pleasure, of union, of all men and women might approach one another in laughter and in longing. Why, he asked himself, would the abbot keep such a book? He turned the thought over and over, like a bead in his hand. Perhaps it was a test, a trap left for a curious novice to stumble upon. Perhaps it was a relic from a time before the abbot had taken vows, many years younger, his robes not yet upon him, still living in the world of men. Could it be that even holy men had once known desire? The thought unsettled him. All his training had spoken of emptiness, of renouncing attachment. Yet here was proof that knowledge of longing, of the body, of laughter and touch, was preserved even within these monastery walls. A secret contradiction. When dawn came, Arun worked as usual, sweeping the temple courtyard and refilling oil lamps in the hall of prayer. But every sight and sound seemed charged. When he passed young villagers bringing offering of fruit, he noticed, for the first time, the bright laughter of the girls. When the abbot recited verses, Arun wondered if behind those calm eyes there lingered memory. His world was suddenly doubled. The silence of the monastery, and, shimmering beneath it, another current, the pulse of life outside. That night, as he sat again in his corner with his lamp, he allowed himself another look at the Kama Sutra. He unwrapped the cloth with trembling hands, every rustle of fabric like a thunderclap in the quiet hall. He ran his fingers across the edged palm leaves, feeling the grooves of the script. The words were not crude. They spoke with a measured rhythm of philosophy. They spoke of how men and women must approach each other, not as animals, but as beings seeking harmony. They described how love was an art, cultivated with patience, understanding, and respect. Arun read of courtship, of how a man should win trust before desire. He read of laughter at feasts, of the exchange of poems and music, of women who could outwit men in games and conversation. And then, delicately, the text spoke of the act of love itself, not as mere satisfaction, but as a union of breath, rhythm, and spirit. He felt his face flush, his pulse race. He shut the manuscript quickly, fearful that someone might appear and catch him. But the words had already taken root. That night he dreamed for the first time of a woman, a face half-formed, eyes dark and shining, a hand that brushed his as softly as river reeds. He dreamed of laughter, of color, of walking beneath flowering trees with someone at his side. This is the power of the Kama Sutra. It was never only about positions, nor only about pleasure. It was about longing itself, the universal pull that binds human hearts. In a world where kingdoms rose and fell, where men strove for power and monks sought release from desire, still the thread of connection endured. The Kama Sutra, with the recognition that human beings are not only minds, but bodies, not only seekers of the divine, but also seekers of each other. For Arun, the manuscript was not just forbidden pages. It was a mirror, showing him the side of life he had been taught to close away. And though shame burned in him, though he feared discovery, he knew he would read it again. The text had awoken in him something that could not be undone: curiosity, yearning, and the dawning realization that even monks, even abbots, were still men. And so, lying awake beneath the flicker of the oil lamp, he whispered to himself what he would never dare say aloud. Perhaps longing is not the enemy of wisdom. Perhaps it, too, is a teacher. The morning bells had barely finished echoing through the stone halls when Arun was summoned. His heart beat like a frightened bird within its cage, for he knew the abbot had discovered his trespass. He entered the abbot's quarters, with his eyes fixed upon the floor. The air smelled of incense and sandalwood oil, and the morning sun, filtered through a carved lattice, painted the room in broken squares of gold. There, seated cross-legged upon a woven mat, the abbot waited. His robe was the color of aged saffron, and his face was a map of both years and serenity. He did not look angry, but his silence was a weight heavier than stone. Arun, the abbot said at last. his voice neither sharp nor tender, but steady as the river. You have opened what was not yours to open. The young monk fell to his knees. Words tangled on his tongue, yet none would form. He pressed his palms together, head bent low. I did not mean, Arun began, but the abbot raised a hand. You meant it very well, the elder replied. Curiosity is a flame, and the fire does not burn only in the kitchens. It burns in the hearts of young men. Arun's face burned with shame. Yet the abbot's tone was not one of scorn. He waited for the rebuke, the punishment, perhaps even expulsion. But the abbot did not speak of discipline. Instead, he reached to his side and drew forth the same palm leaf bundle. With care, he laid it upon the mat between them. Do you know what this is? Arun swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. The Kama Sutra, Master. Yes, a book spoken of with both reverence and suspicion. Many in the world outside know it only by fragments, reduced to whispers of postures and pleasures. But it is more than that, much more. He untied the cloth slowly, revealing the ancient leaves. His fingers, though worn with age, touched the manuscript as gently as one might handle the bones of a saint. Long ago, before either of us was born, a man named Vatsyayana composed this treatise. It was not written for monks, nor for ascetics. It was for householders, for kings, for courtesans, for those who must live in the swirl of society and court. It teaches not merely how two bodies may meet, but how a man and woman may share life, how households may be ordered, how friendships may be tended, and how pleasures may be known without destroying one's soul. Arun's breath caught. But Master, why would monks keep such a book? The abbot's eyes softened, and for the first time, his lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Because, Arun, to renounce the world, one must first understand what one renounces. A man who shuts his eyes to a feast does not know whether he is fasting or merely starving. But a man who has seen the feast, smelled its fragrance, known its taste, and yet chooses the simple grain, that man truly renounces. The words sank deep, as though they were drops of water falling into the stillest of wells. Arun felt their ripples spreading through him. The abbot continued, Kings once prized this book. Courtesans, poets, and scholars read it as they read scriptures. To govern men, one must know their desires. To guide souls, one must understand what entangles them. That is why this book rests here, in silence, not as a lure, but as a mirror of the world we have left behind. Arun's gaze lingered on the palm leaves, at once repelled and drawn. 100 questions swirled within him, about love, about women he had never seen, about the mysteries of a world from which he was cloistered. Yet in that swirl, the abbot's words stood like a mountain. To renounce, one must first understand. The elder monk folded the cloth once more, binding the manuscript. "You are young," he said softly. "Your blood runs hot. This is no sin. But understand this, Arun. The path you walk is narrow. The heart pulls outward. The senses crave the world. Yet wisdom lies not in fleeing without knowledge, not in drowning without desire, but in walking the middle way, aware, but unbound." Arun bowed low until his forehead touched the mat. His shame was tempered now with something deeper. Gratitude and the heavy burden of new knowledge. He felt as though a door had been opened, not only to the forbidden chamber of the abbot's belongings, but to the labyrinth of human life itself. When he rose, the abbot's gaze lingered upon him, kind and piercing at once. "Go, Arun, tend to your duties. Let this fire within you not consume, but illuminate. In time, you will understand that even the Kama Sutra, in its way, points back to the same truth the Buddha spoke. All things arise and pass, pleasures and sorrows alike. To know them is to see beyond them." Arun pressed his palms together and backed away, heart trembling, mind alight. Outside, the morning sun washed the courtyard in pale fire. He felt different as he stepped into its glow, still bound to silence and prayer, but carrying within him a secret seed of worldly wisdom. That day, as he swept the flagstones and fetched water for the kitchen, Arun's thoughts wandered. He no longer saw the temple as merely walls of stone, but as a bridge between two worlds. And though he dared not look again upon the manuscript, he knew that it had already looked into him. The abbot's words echoed. To renounce, one must first understand what one renounces. And Arun, though still young, began to glimpse the vastness of that understanding. The cell was quiet. lit only by the faint amber glow of an oil lamp sputtering beside a clay bowl. Shadows wavered on the stone walls, dancing like restless spirits, while the muffled hum of evening chants drifted through the cloisters. Arun sat cross-legged upon his reed mat, hands trembling in his lap. His heart was a battlefield, one part bound by vows, another straining toward the unknown. The manuscript no longer lay before him, yet its presence filled the room. The syllables of its title, Kama Sutra, reverberated through his mind like temple bells struck in secret. His master's words returned again and again. To renounce, one must first understand what one renounces. Arun closed his eyes. Within the darkness, images bloomed unbidden. The curve of a smile he had never seen. The laughter of a woman imagined. The bustling chaos of markets beyond the monastery gates. And the whisper of the river, where boats carried men to cities filled with color, sound, and longing. The night deepened. The chanting ceased, leaving only the wind sighing across the courtyard. He lay upon his mat, but could not sleep. For knowledge, like longing, once awakened, never fully slept. It stirred within him, urging, questioning, beckoning. By the time the oil lamp had guttered into smoke, his decision had already taken root, though he dared not yet name it. Dawn came pale, and mist rest. The high terraces of the monastery seemed to float in clouds, their carved spires rising like fingers through veils of silver. The chief abbot, as was his custom, climbed to the stone platform that overlooked the valley. The air was cool, filled with the scent of damp earth and pine. He breathed deeply, his lips moving with unspoken prayers. Then, through the thinning fog, along the winding path below, he saw a figure, small against the vastness of the land. A monk with a travel sack slung over his shoulder. His gait was low, hesitant at first, then purposeful, his form fading and reappearing as the mist shifted. The abbot did not call out. He only watched. His expression was neither sorrow nor anger, but a quiet acceptance, as though he had long known this would come. The figure moved further down the bus, and the mist embraced him until he was no more than a shadow swallowed by the morning. The abbot bowed his head, letting the silence speak. When the temple bell rang to summon the monks for the morning prayers, one voice was missing. The rolled saffron robes filled the hall. But Arun's place was empty. No one spoke of it, though many eyes glanced toward the vacant mat. The chants continued, steady as the flow of time itself, the harmony unbroken, even by absence. Far down the valley, Arun paused on a ridge where the path curved. He turned, heart caught in his throat, and looked back. Through the curtain of mist, he saw the outline of the monastery, distant yet enduring, its spires crowned by the dawn's pale fire. The sound of the bells carried faintly to him, a reminder of the life he had known, of silence, discipline, renunciation. His lips whispered the abbot's words, as though they were etched upon his very soul. To renounce, one must first understand what one renounces. Arun felt both the weight of those words and the strange liberation within them. He was no longer a boy cleaning the chambers of his elders. He was no longer only a monk, bound to rituals he did not fully comprehend. He was a seeker, one who must walk through the world to know it, to taste it, to understand its sweetness and its sorrow. The sack on his back held little: a change of robes, a clay cup, a folded blanket. But within his heart, he carried something greater: the questions, the longings, and the secret fire that knowledge had awakened. He knew not where the path would lead, to cities or villages, to love or loneliness, to wisdom or folly. Yet, to walk it was the only choice he could make. The sun rose higher, dissolving the mist, revealing forests and fields bathed in gold. Arun stood a moment longer, drinking in the sight, the silence, the enormity of what lay before him. Then he turned away, step after step, carrying him into the unknown. Behind him, the monastery remained, eternal, unshaken, a place of stillness above the world. Before him, the road stretched, endless, alive with possibility. And in the space between, in the quiet of his mind, the words echoed like a blessing and a burden alike. For knowledge, like longing, once awakened, never fully sleeps. The sound of bells faded into wind, into birdsong, into silence, and Arun walked on.